Do we get to the little clapper different thing? Oh, we're on. Okay, like we said, Lyn Buchanan, new speaker, he's coming up, one of the original guys in the IRVA program of the government. Very interesting. It's subject matter, as you can see up there. For those of you from Texas, that says IRVA scoring methods, because we can't have assurance that you know how to read. I can say that because I'm from Texas myself, and I know for a fact about half can't read. But that's okay. IRVA scoring methods, I guess that has something to do with either scoring etches on the plates, or is it actually rating how well you read?
It's using acid, yeah.
Well,
No, it's.
Lyn's going to go ahead and take it over right now.
All right, is this working? Is it?
It will be working. Okay.
Will be working. All right. Okay, try now. There you go. Just a few minutes ago, there was a question about the score on the thing that Angela did, and she said, well, we didn't use this scoring method, we used this other scoring method. And that's what I'm here, I mean, it's a great segue into what I'm talking about here. The remote viewing field, nobody ever points this up, and it has always wondered, I've always wondered why they haven't, has 4 different modes of operation. First of all, you have the research mode, which has a world all to itself. You have the training mode, which has a world all to itself. You have the practice mode, which is a world all to itself. And you have operations, which is another world all to itself. It would be very nice if we could make one type of scoring which would work for all 4 of these different worlds, but the fact is that they don't. Remote view scoring methods. How many of you have heard somebody say that remote viewing is 15% accurate? How many of you have heard always 100% accurate? Different people score sessions in different ways, and what I'm here to talk about is those different ways. Some of them are good. Some of them are good for one mode and not another mode. And so what I want to do is I want to talk about the method, bring up the good and bad points of it, because every method has both good and bad, and then go through those 4 modes and tell how useful or unuseful each method is. What I'd like to do is clear up in your mind the fact that you can have one person score a session and he will say with all authority and proof, this is 15% accurate. You bring in another person, they score the session for a different purpose, and they will say it is 60% accurate, and they have the documentation to prove it. What they're doing is they're scoring for different things. One of the first methods, of course, is the feels good method. I kind of scrounged graphics here, and so this is from the wanderinghermit.com. I don't mean to mess up any copyright things. The feels good method is the most used method among psychics. If it feels good, it must be great. Oh, this session felt good, so I know I was on target. Unfortunately, this is mostly used for targets which have no feedback. When we start making sense of a target, it starts feeling like a good session. That doesn't mean we're on target. It just means that we've taken red, round, rubbery, and we've made it into a ball. Ah, we're at the beach, and so on. When what we actually have may be a target where there is something red, something round, and something rubbery, okay? And so anytime you start putting these thoughts together and making sense, it feels like a good session. You can be extremely wrong when you start doing that. Therefore, when we're working in a pure state, you stay right-brained, it doesn't make sense, and so generally, the viewer is just totally lost. And so it doesn't have a feel-good. We have done some work on this, and we have found that accuracy is quite often inversely proportional to the amount of feel-good in the session. In other words, the sessions that feel the best to the viewers generally have the lowest scores. Okay, the feels good method does not have any basis for fact and is usually opposite to the truth. It does not prove the existence of psi for many reasons that I won't go into because I've got a timer, the time Nazi back here, and you know, and all that. It does not prove the existence of psi and usually discourages the use of psi talents by the real world. That is, if you work on the feels good method, you may wonder why nobody's coming to you and asking you to do sessions. Generally, it restricts the use of that viewer to people who only want feel-good results. It does, however, allow a viewer to get in-session impetus to keep working. One of the problems you have with remote viewers is they quit too soon. But when a person gets into this feels-good mode, a lot of times you can't stop them. You know, you'll end the session and 3 hours later they're still saying, oh, you know what else? And so it is great for providing in-session impetus. In fact, it's addictive. And this is one of the biggest problems with the feels good method. Scoring a session by whether it feels good or not, you begin to want every session to feel good, and you get to where you can't view without going for that feels good method. It does not have any scientific value whatever. So let's look at it according to those 4 modes. For research, it's useless. Training, well, it trains bad habits. Therefore, there's a negative aspect to the training. Practice is even worse because it embeds those bad habits. Operations, quite often it gives the entire field a bad name simply because you've got customers out there who are very grounded, very scientific, very facts-oriented, and you're telling them how something feels, and you know, oh, it feels great, therefore this person, and you keep on. That's not what they want to hear, so it gives the field a bad name. The good photographer method. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with the definition of a good photographer. A bad photographer is one who takes 10 pictures and shows them to you. A good photographer is one who takes 1,000 pictures and shows you the best 10. And the good photographer method is one where somebody comes up to you and they say, because they base their reputations as well as their own self-evaluations on their successes only. They pull out a newspaper article and they say, look, I did this, I worked on this case for the police department. They never tell you how many cases they failed on. They never tell you how many bad sessions they did. They're only showing you the best 10 out of their 1,000 sessions. Therefore, the record keeping that they do kind of forgets about those bad sessions. True analysis of our findings of a viewer's work is impossible because things which were wrong, even within a single session, are not shown to anybody. And therefore, this method does not prove the existence of psi or personal talent. It does not encourage the use by customers of psi-talents. Usually they'll use a person once because this person says, oh, look at all the successes I've had. So they use them once, there's no success, and so they never use them again. It does not provide a method for analysis of the viewer's strengths and weaknesses. It does not provide for improvement because you tend to forget the bad things, you don't build on them. It does, however, provide an overall rating for a viewer's reputation. Now this is kind of important. Just like a good photographer only shows you 10 pictures, it shows that he is capable of taking good photos. It also shows when a psychic does this that they're capable of doing a good session. It's just that a photographer can come, take 20 rolls of film, and only bring you back the best 10 pictures. The psychic cannot come to your office or to your department or agency and do 1,000 sessions right there while you're standing there waiting for an answer. And so the problem exists that the way, if a person scores their sessions by the good photographer method, then the way you tell whether they're a good psychic or not is not by looking at any of their sessions. It's by asking the one question: how many times did they call you back to work on another case? Okay? If the answer is 0, you've just gotten your evaluation of that psychic. Joe McMonigal was telling me one time that about 3 times a year an oil company sends him a check for $10,000 and a map. He douses, makes an X, and sends it back off. And I said, do you ever get feedback? He said, yeah, the next time they send me a check for $10,000 and another map, yeah. And the good photographer method, that's the only way you can score the work of any viewer. It does allow people to fool themselves and others, which is a very bad thing. It does not have scientific validity simply because the old database rule that partial data is no data at all. So let's rate these. Research, it's virtually useless unless record keeping is done. If you get a person who works this way but keeps detailed records, then the data is there and you can use this for research. When properly done, it becomes extremely valuable method. Training, it's valuable because it teaches people the difference between a good and bad session. If they're going to show you a session, they better know which session was a good one. And so it teaches them to discern between good and bad sessions. For practice, it teaches the viewer to self-evaluate properly. For operations, this is an undesirable method, simply because you come in and you show these articles out of newspapers and you promise that I'm a good viewer, I can do your work, and then the chances are that you can't deliver. Okay, and so it's actually a very bad method for the reputation of the entire field. Okay, another method, I'm supposed to stand in one place here. I'm a pacer, by the way. The all or nothing method. Either everything is 100% correct or it serves as proof of failure. Viewers and psychics are too savvy to use this method. For one thing, they know that humans make mistakes. However, this has been developed by a fine art by debunkers such as the amazing Randy and others. You can be right 99% of the time and then make a mistake and, oh, it's only 99%? Well, that proves it doesn't work, you know. And so you will see this, because you will see this presented by really screwed up debunkers. I included it in this session. It does not take any human factors into consideration. It does not have any scientific value, not even a scientific basis for believing it. I mean, it's so blatantly wrong that only the most undiscerning will be fooled by it. It does provide the user, the person who scores this way, with a strong ability to lead unsuspecting people away from scientific thinking. It does not prove the non-existence of psi. Very important point. The fact that you say, oh, he made a mistake, does not prove that he is not psychic. So let's look at this. Research, admittedly, this is totally useless. Training, it's useless. It demands 100% of the time from the viewer. You can't do that. Practice is the same way. And so the viewer only practices at failing. Operations, it's totally useless. Promises a good session, which is impossible to deliver. In fact, it'll promise a bad session. Then, there's one called the always all method. All perceptions are 100% correct, and if they appear to be wrong, it's just because you don't understand them. Now, as laughable as that sounds at the front, there are some values to this. One, it doesn't take human factors into account unless it's done properly. It does not allow a viewer to learn from his or her mistakes unless it encourages them to study why the information appeared wrong. Now, if you add that into it, then what you're doing is you're getting the viewer to go back over their session and say, I appear to be wrong here. What was it I really meant? What was going on inside my mind that made me say this instead of what was right? Therefore, it does teach as viewers what's going on inside their minds while they're viewing, if you make them analyze. It does not suit the reality of applications in the real world. It does not provide a good reputation when viewers always have to justify things that appear wrong to the customer or to everybody. It can have valid scientific value, but only for specific purposes, and only if analyzed and documented correctly, which winds up to just about be a nightmare. There you go. Okay. So let's take a look at the ratings on this. Research, it's basically useless. Training, it's destructive if done wrong, but very useful if done correctly. If you train a viewer to look at everything they've written down and work on their mind and say, what made me say this instead of the other? Then it's extremely useful for training and for practice. For operations, it's embarrassing. The viewer has to always try to explain apparent misses, and that turns customers off. The happy camper method. Believe it or not, this photo is from www.dreamcamper.com. The happy camper method is customer scored completely. That means if you have a happy customer, then you did well. If the person for whom you do the session says that they're happy with what you did, you succeed. There's a problem. I put out a manual of remote viewing terminology. There's a term waffling where you're making excuses for what was said and was wrong. And waffling is not put into the viewers section of the terminology manual. It's put basically into the customer section, because when we teach viewers, we teach them that that there are things you cannot learn from anything but failure. You have to fail to learn some things. Therefore, we teach viewers to say, give me the right to be wrong. I was wrong. Now what can I learn from it? When a viewer gets something wrong, immediately everybody else says, oh, well, you know, and they start making excuses for the viewer. Well, the customer is going to do the same. The customer is never going to turn around and say to you as a viewer, I think you're full of crap because none of this is right. they'll say, well, yeah, that was nice and it was useful and we'll give you a call. But you got positive feedback. It was nice and useful. Therefore, a good session gets you positive feedback. A bad session gets you positive feedback. Okay, because nobody wants to be rude enough to actually tell you that you messed up. This method does have minor practical value in that it causes the viewer to try to please the customer, thereby creating customers willing to use psi. It does not provide accuracy, always provide accuracy, since what pleases the customer may not be the truth. There are a lot of customers who don't want to hear the truth. I can tell you that from experience. It does not have scientific value because the feedback can't be trusted. So let's look at it according to the 4 modes. Research, it's useless. The feedback can't be trusted. Training, it's destructive because it teaches the viewer to go after something besides the truth. It teaches the viewer to go after what will please the customer. Practice, it's destructive because the viewer sets up habits of viewing the customer and not the target. As far as operations is concerned, it's embarrassing. Sooner or later, the customer is going to realize that you're only feeding him what he wants to hear. And at that point, you have just lost someone who is willing to use psi in their work. The "we killed a bear" method. Anybody know that old saying? It's a Texas saying. Old saying, "Mama, we killed a bear, but don't worry, Papa shot it." This method, if you work, say, on a police case and the case is successfully solved, you take that police case and the newspaper clippings and you say, "Look, I worked on this case and it was solved. Therefore, we shot a bear." Okay? You ignore the fact that the police used a whole lot of other resources in order to solve that crime, and they may not have used your information at all. An individual piece of data or an individual case is meaningless. Here again, the way you can tell if you did well is, did they call you back to help on another case? But from the data presented in your session, you probably can't tell whether you did well or not. It does offer the viewer the opportunity to ask for customer-generated documentation, which is very rare in the remote viewing field. You do a job for a customer, they move on to some other job. They don't want to spend time going over the sessions and giving you detailed feedback. It does allow the viewer to establish a personal track record. How many times did you get called back? Hey, I get called once a week by this police department. Oh, I'm impressed. Okay? It's only valid if both positive and negative reports are used for documentation. So if you document everything, this can be a valid way to do it. It does imply, but does not prove, the existence of psi. It does have some scientific merit, but only if extremely accurate records and full documentation are kept, providing for third-party analysis and judging. So to rate these, research, it's useless as most people practice it, but if you keep strict documentation, it can be useful for research. Training, it's basically useless. I won't even go into why, I think that's so obvious. Practice, it's destructive to the viewer's sense of reality. One of the things you'll note, well, maybe this is my own personal filtering, but the people who tend to show me things that don't mention them and don't mention their work and say, "See, I worked on this case, therefore I'm a good psychic." One of the things I found is they tend to have this sort of loose connection with reality. I'll leave that one alone too. Operations, it's embarrassing because the viewer begins looking to everybody like a crackpot and a glory hog. They shove these articles in your face and they want credit where credit has not always been earned. Okay, the everybody says so method. There was another question that was given to Angela about viewers, agreement among viewers. Agreement between viewers is taken as proof of accuracy of the information. Pollution of viewers is totally ignored in this method, and when somebody says all the viewers got the same thing, listen, I can tell you, you put 10 viewers viewing a target clean, without pollution, they're not going to all get the same thing. When somebody tells me all my viewers got the same thing, my first impression was, that is so polluted that it's probably going to be useless. The information will probably be useless. It has to be suspect because viewers do not get the same thing always. 10 eyewitnesses to the same accident will give you 10 different reports. Okay, I have seen many times when you would have 6 viewers, 5 would say the car is red, 1 would say the car is green, and guess what? The car was green. There's another phenomenon called the neighbor's cat, or telepathic overlay, and if you are told, if you realize that your information is not going to get reported unless it agrees with the other viewers, guess what you're going to start viewing? You're going to start viewing the other viewer's session, not the target, because you want your information in there. And so research, this is dangerous. It's realistic looking data, but it can lead you astray. Training, it's dangerous because it teaches the viewer to go for telepathic overlay rather than for the truth. Practice, it's destructive and entrenches the bad habit of viewing the wrong target. Operations, it's dependable enough times that people start having some faith in it, and then all of a sudden you hit that time when it was the green car and not the red, and because only one viewer said it was green, you didn't report that, and so you have your whole team saying the car is red as far as the customer knows, and sure enough there's a green car. And so it's undependable, and sooner or later it will rise up and bite you right in the tail if you use this method of consensus analysis and reporting. I don't know who these young ladies are. I put out a thing on the internet that I needed a picture of a lineup, police lineup, and this is a thing I got back. I am sort of afraid to ask what this picture was generated for or anything, but anyway, again, I'm not trying to cross any copyright lines here. I just got this over the internet, so I used it. The police lineup method, a session is scored. You do the session, and then in order to score it, you line up 5 targets, only one of which is the correct one, and you see whether or not an innocent bystander who knows nothing about it can read the session and the summary and select the right target. It actually tests the overall process, and it does it extremely well. This is a time-honored and very respectable method. But it doesn't just test your ability to view. It also tests your ability to view and write a coherent summary. And to grab a person out of the hallway, it also tests their ability to read a coherent summary and understand what you've written. Listen, I write a lot of email, and I have learned on the internet, you can write the word hello, 3 people will argue with you, and 10 other people will misinterpret what you said. It's just amazing. And so this method tests the overall process of viewing a session, writing a summary, having an innocent bystander or a neutral party check it and decide on on what it means. The method itself lends itself well to scientific documentation. It's a very short method. Somebody reads the summary, they pick first, here's my first selection, second selection, and so on. If they pick the right one, you get a 5. If the second one they pick is the right target, you get score 4, and so on. And so it's very easy. It's easy to collect data, and it can be kept pure and pollution-free very easily. So it's easy for good oversight. Oversight here not meaning to miss it, but oversight meaning watching it and keeping it pure. It cannot measure specific parts or details of the process or a single viewer or any one specific habit that single viewer is doing unless extreme other measures are taken to set up situations in laboratories where you can control those sessions where a viewer does that one thing and those sessions where a viewer doesn't do that one thing. And so this process alone is great for scoring the overall process. One of the problems with the police lineup method is the overlapping perceptions. You have 5 targets. Look at these targets, all different people, all different dress and all that, and yet 4 of them have black shoes, 2 of them have black pants, 2 of them have red tops. There are 2 blondes, 2 honey blondes, I don't know, dishwater blondes, 1 redhead, 3 are wearing belts so that you can see, and 2 you don't know. And so you see, there is an overlap here. A viewer comes up with certain perceptions, and you still have to make a non-viewer judgment on what the answer is. So the answer, of course, to this problem is get 5 different targets. And here are 5 completely different targets. And so I say, this is a live person with honey blonde hair. Or this is a live being with honey blonde hair. Okay? You have the first girl and Scooby-Doo. Both are live beings with honey blonde hair. Okay? You say, there's a rocket, or I get something, a rocket. Okay? The toy soldier is holding a rocket launcher, and there's a rocket firing off on the third one. You've still got unsuspected overlapping problems. To show you this, here's a picture of my wife fixing the dog's dinner, and of course the dog always feels the need to supervise. And the other picture over here is the Crash Down Cafe in Roswell, New Mexico. Totally different targets, right? Okay. Food smells. This is what a viewer might say. Clattering dish sounds. Someone waiting on someone else. Okay? Saucer shape. Non-human. What happened? You should change your battery. I didn't bring one. Okay. Is this not plugged into the power? I don't know. Non-human intelligence. Okay. Blue, green, gray, white, and so on. Things that are common to both pictures, which from a non-viewer standpoint, a non-viewer is picking out these targets that are totally different. They would not see the targets in the same way a remote viewer would. So you've got the problem of overlapping perceptions no matter what. You also have another problem, and that is judge interpretation. Joe one time was doing a demo, a dog and pony show, and he said, it bothers me when the time Nazi walks forward here. And
we love you.
30 minutes, okay.
We love you.
And he said about 5 times during his session, this is not a waterfall. And then he had his session, he wrote his summary on the board, and they laid out 5 targets. 5 people who came up to check picked out the waterfall as the target. It wasn't the target, and he had said, this is not a waterfall, and yet they picked that out anyway. Okay, the police lineup method does provide statistics on the overall set of processes involved in the testing. It cannot provide data for uncontrolled work in the real world. You've got to have a situation, basically, where you have controls over everything. Now, it can provide data. It can be useful in this, but you have to really be careful. It does not provide statistics on individual aspects of the process unless you do some really fancy work that's added to the method. It can easily be compared to chance scoring. Now, this is actually a very important part. It's very easy to say, what are the chances somebody will pick target number 1? What's the chances people will pick target number 2? And so you can compare a viewer's results against chance. Therefore, it does provide statistical proof for the existence of psi. This is one of the biggest values of this method, and it's a very good method. So, ratings, research, extremely useful. It's cheap and efficient, provides a tremendous way to get unpolluted data. Training, non sequitur. You can use this method of scoring with any training method, and it works equally as well. Practice, it's helpful because it gives the viewer a yardstick to go by and a goal to shoot for. I want to describe things so well that they have to pick out the target that's right. Operations, it's very useful. It places the onus of analysis and interpretation on the customer, who usually is best suited for those jobs anyway. I can guarantee you, when you're working as a remote viewing project manager, the customer is not going to give you all the information they have. So if you then turn around and try to score a viewer's session while not having all the information, you're going to make mistakes. This method puts the onus on the customer. The last one I'm going to go into, to make this fairly short, is called the statistical method. It breaks the results into individual perceptions and scores every perception against actual feedback. Now, this is the one that Angela used in the project that she did. It identifies the strengths and weaknesses of the viewers. It develops viewer profiles, process profiles, target profiles, and all different kinds of profiles according to the way you actually manipulate the data. It provides very specific results about minute aspects of every viewer, every monitor, everything that's done within the session. But it has problems. One of the problems is that it's tons and tons of work. It's very time consuming to take a 50-page summary plus 100 pages of session with drawings and all that, and pull out every perception and score it. The specific testing, for one thing, may not provide information about other things. This method is very useful for detailed studies of specific problems, development of new techniques, and to design work towards specific end applications. Let me show you an example of this because it gets confusing. Viewer summary. The target is a white 2-story house on a steep and grassy hill. It has blue shutters. Okay, there is a house. Now, I'm going to indent and put everything that describes the house a little bit indented underneath it. It's white, 2 stories tall. It's on a hill. Now I've got some descriptions of the hill, so I'm going to indent under hill And the descriptions of the hill will go there to show that they're not describing the house. So you say the hill is steep and is grassy. The house has blue shutters. I take it it's not the hill that has blue shutters. The shutters, again, you indent, and they are blue. Now then, we get feedback. The feedback picture shows a white one-story house with green shutters. The house is on a very low grassy hill. So it's very easy for us to line up some scoring slots here and say, is there a house? Yes. Is it white? Yes. 2 stories tall? Nope. On a hill? Yeah. Is the hill steep? No. Is it grassy? Yeah, it's grassy. Okay. Are there shutters? Yep. And are the shutters blue? No. And so then we can say you had 8 perceptions, 5 were correct, you get a score of 62.5%. Now, don't make the mistake of, because this looks scientific, it is. It's not. If I had 1 perception and that 1 perception were correct, I would get 100%. If I had 100 perceptions and I still got that 1 correct perception, I would have 1%. So this score doesn't really indicate anything. Besides that, what if that 1 perception were the one that solved the case? Then I got a 1% on a session, and I helped solve the case. So see, this score does not have what could be called scientific accuracy or even scientific application. However, look what we can now do. We can say a house is an object. White is a color. 2 stories tall, well, that's a size. Object is a hill. Steep is a shape. Grassy is a texture. Shutters are objects. Blue is color. Therefore, look what we can come up with. Now, 1 session, of course, is not enough to make a viewer profile. You'd have to have hundreds of sessions. But if it stayed like this, you would say this viewer gets objects right all the time, gets textures right, gets the colors right about half the time, never gets sizes and shapes right. And therefore, you have said, if the customer, the police department or something, needs the name of an object, I call on this viewer because that's his strength. Another viewer will have a totally different set, will have a totally different profile. The statistical method, the simplified scoring method, does not provide accuracy rating of accuracy. It does give an accuracy rating on dependability. What that score said was, basically, of what the viewer told me, he was 62% right. 62% of the things that he told me was right. Over a period of hundreds and thousands of sessions, you'll have an average score. So it sets up a dependability rating, which is not the same as an accuracy rating. Okay? If the viewer says it, how much can I depend on it to be true? It does give an accurate profile of a viewer's strengths and weaknesses to indicate readiness for use, and it shows where they need further training, practice, and improvement. It does not compare scores to chance. And this again is very important for research. It does give a documented, detailed record of a viewer's work. And it can be customized. Once you get that data, you can remassage that data to find out just about anything on any detail without having to do another 1,000 sessions. Okay? And so you just take the old data, you remassage it, you resort it according to such things as, okay, how do all viewers do when working with this monitor as opposed to when working with this monitor, and so forth. The statistical method for research, it's extremely useful for research into specific aspects of the operations, but not for overall. For general research, it's just not useful. Training, it's extremely useful because it teaches the viewer to understand both his self and the process. Practice, it's extremely useful because it develops excellent work habits through detailed feedback. The viewer can look at those details and find out where they need work, what they're strong in, what they're weak in, and so on. Operations, it's extremely useful but getting proper feedback from the customer is quite often a major problem. There are other methodologies for scoring, but almost all of them fall into the main classes I've already shown you here. The most important considerations to make for any method of scoring are, what does the method actually score? When somebody says remote viewing is 15% accurate, I want to know at what? When somebody else says it's 100% accurate, tell me what it's 100% accurate at doing. And if the answer is everything, then the person is blowing smoke. What are the chances for error in the scoring? What are the chances for bias, selective memory, operator bias, waffling, and so on? Those things get built into the actual scoring, by the way. Of what use will the final information be, and to what purposes or knowledge bases or applications can that information be applied? The end result, different methods produce widely variant scores, even when you've got two different methods scoring the same session. You'll get two totally different results. People tend to judge viewers' work by their own parochial thinking. You have many people who have developed a scoring method, and because their scoring method works for their purposes, they immediately condemn all other scoring methods without ever even looking into them to see if those scoring methods work for other reasons. People who are not familiar with the different scoring methods judge all methods by the bottom line scoring. So one person says it's 15% accurate. Okay, that's it. I've got one expert, Ed May, who says it's 15% accurate. Therefore, the public, the press, everybody says remote viewing is only 15% accurate. You've got the amazing Randy who says, well, if you judge, they got a 60%, but if you judge that against chance, which may be 50%, then we'll give them 15% for their psychic. And then they come out to the public and say, they were only 15% accurate. Why, chance is 50. And so you get a distorted answer that way, but the public accepts that because a public figure said it. There's no way to translate or transpose the meaning of one scoring method into the meaning of another. Therefore, the Tower of Babel of scoring methods requires that if you're going to be serious about this field, you have to know the different scoring methods, and you have to know what people are talking about, and you have to know to ask the question. When somebody says, we're 70% accurate, you say, at doing what? Oh, in what way are you 70% accurate? It takes a lot of study and a lot of learning. The bottom line, when it comes to scoring, there's no such thing as a perfect method. And I don't care what anyone tells you. They will be dogmatic about you have to have this or that or the other, and you have to score it this way. They don't have the final answer for scoring because there are 1,000 different reasons to score. There are 1,000 different reasons why you want to find out something different, and so there are 1,000 different scoring methods. That was just basically a summary. What I wanted to get across was, when you hear somebody tell you about their accuracy, take it with a grain of salt. Realize that they're coming from their own parochial view, and ask a question. If the answer that they tell you is, we're this accurate at everything, they're blowing smoke. Do we have time for a question?
Yes, we have time for a couple questions.
Okay.
It's up to you.
You're the time. You're the time Nazi. Yeah.
We have a question here. I guess Russell will have the first one.
I thought that was a wonderful talk, and I'm happy to say I agree with 98.5% of what you had to say. I want to reiterate one really important thing that you said that I completely agree with, and that the statistical method doesn't present evidence for psychic functioning.
That's right.
In Northern California, where we did many, many experiments, our typical viewer response that they would like to give is, I see the site clearly, the sky is blue, the grass is green, I see a redwood building with sliding doors, and there's some crushed redwood bark on the ground. That's what I get. And that will always be 100% correct. And what we teach the viewer to do, because eventually our targets were judged by this police lineup method, is that you have to let go of your perception and find something to delight the judge downstream, who's going to have to separate out your present mentation from all the other things in Northern California.
And, excuse me, but right there, that shows one of the particular uses why it is so perfect for research, and yet trying to please the person who's going to judge it will quite often be the wrong method for using it for operations.
Well,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
by please, I mean, give the judge an opportunity to separate it out.
Yeah.
And the one other thing I would like to say is that the judging of these things, where you try and pick out which one of 5 is the right answer, we don't actually pull somebody off the street to do that, but we have a rehearsal and practice period for choosing judges just as much as we do for viewers.
Good.
So you need a skillful and experienced judge to evaluate these things, just as you need a skillful and experienced viewer.
I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of people who use this method will not pay attention to the need for that one little step that you train a judge and what they're supposed to do. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh my gosh. Pardon me, we had a private conversation that just went a little bit off the side here. Okay, we have another question here.
All right.
Before I turn it over real quick, as you notice that Stephen Schwartz hadn't made it yet, he's on his way someplace in the ozone, he's going to be here. But after Lyn's speech, we've moved Colonel John Alexander to follow Lyn, and he'll fit in where it says, right after Lyn, or after Andrew, whatever his thing is. The next person coming up is Colonel Alexander.
Okay.
We have a question here with Cassandra, and if you have a question, come up to the microphone. I have a big cord, but not that big.
This kind of dovetails in with last year's presentation. You said that the statistical analysis took a long time.
It does.
How are you able to shorten that and deal with that to both handle this analysis that you're talking about and target selection for your people?
Target selection is another thing altogether. You have to select targets for training and for practice according to the way a viewer sees them, not according to the way you see them outside of viewing. The statistical method, how do you shorten it? If you want to keep it right, you don't.
All right, have another question here.
Just Lyn, more of a comment than a question. You could talk about this for just a second. When a viewer's doing a real world viewing, they may never get any feedback.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And so there may be one viewer who does real world that happens to get feedback and makes them very correct. And there may be other viewers who are dead not correct, who never get any feedback, and they may be looked in different lights.
That's right.
So I thought I'd kind of bring that up, and maybe you'd want to run with that.
That's absolutely right. In training, we have found that viewers tend to view their feedback first, beginning viewers, which has an implication for time. They tend to jump forward in time, even without training, to the point of their feedback. But ignoring that, at some point, you have to realize that if a viewer is trained to view only their feedback, then you've developed a great parlor game, but it's totally useless for operations because many times the police don't give you the feedback. I can guarantee you the CIA is never going to give you the truth for a feedback. The feedback may just never come. And therefore, if a viewer is only trained to view their feedback, their session goes to pot. Therefore, at some point in a viewer's training, you have to wean them from feedback, which is it's like any weaning process. It's very traumatic to a viewer. Go ahead.
Okay, we
Skip.
have one more question.
More of a comment than a question. I want to thank you, Lyn, for your presentation.
Oh, I do.
But I want to say more than just that. You have organized and structured this whole spectrum of analysis and looking at the work of the remote viewer in a way that every single one of us in this room understood what you were talking about.
Oh, thank you.
And you have given a wonderful gift to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.